Hello, welcome to this video on how to configure the Filr environment to run against Windows servers and configuring net folders. So first of all, go into your administration console. So when you first come in here, if you've just done an LDAP import, you may be prompted to complete some tasks. This is a net folder server that will be created based on the home directory information that is in the directory, and when we do that LDAP synchronization, it will recognize that users have home directories on specific servers and create those net folder servers for you. But there's a little bit of extra information that's required before those will work. We'll cover that in a moment, but first what I initially do when setting up net folders is set up a proxy identity. This isn't really needed if you've only got one server, but if you've got multiple servers it does make life a little bit easier. The advantages being that you don't have to type in usernames and passwords for each server. You can just reference the proxy identity, but most probably more to the point is that if the proxy user's password changes in the future, you don't have to go into each net folder server to change that. You can just change it on the proxy identity and that will take effect for everything. So let's just on the left hand menu in the administration console, take the option for proxy identities, click on new proxy identity, and here I'll just call this Windows proxy. I then type in the proxy name. This is the FDN of the user, but in this case I'll just browse for it, so I think my one's in management and Filr proxy. So this user is a user that you've created in the directory, and that's got full rights to the file system. It's going to be this user that's going to be used when people are trying to access files that they don't have access to themselves. So for instance, external users. Obviously the file system has no idea who an external user is, so when they access that file it will actually be this user that's going to get it for them. So make sure that this has rights to the file system. Next we just need to type in the password and confirm the password. Click on OK, and that's created our proxy identity for us. Next, let's just go into the net folder server, and you'll see the one that was created for us automatically. So if I just click on that, there's some things we need to do here. The server type we need to change to be, in this case, Microsoft Windows. Server path, we shouldn't need to change that at all. That will have been set up for us as part of the import. Next, just click on the authentication option, and here I could specify a proxy name and password, but as we said, most probably easier to use that proxy user that I configured. And then we've got this option here to test the connection, so I'll just click on that, and there we go, the test has succeeded. Which is good. If that fails, then just check the credentials you've got on the Windows proxy, or if you specified proxy name and password there, and also just check the file system type that you configured on the previous page. Next, let's just go to the synchronization schedule. Make sure that typically you want to enable this, and then you can specify when this sync is going to happen. So this is not moving all the files across into the Filr system. This is just a process to collect metadata from the system. Normally I'd set this for every day and configure it to go in the evening when users are offline, though if it's a big file system and it takes more than 12 hours to actually run the sync, then I might do it once a week at the weekend. So in this instance I'll do it every day and just configure that to go at 6 in the evening. And finally we've got our sync options. So here we've got an option, do we want to index the content of files? We can find files based on file name, for instance, but what this option will do is take the content of a Word document, a PDF file, and let you search on the content, so something within the file. Obviously that's going to increase load on the indexer and indeed the size of the index, so just be aware of that. More often than not these days I don't enable that unless it's absolutely needed. We then have this option to enable just-in-time sync. Do make sure that that is enabled. What that does is, as somebody's navigating through Filr and goes into a directory, what will happen is it will just do a quick directory listing against the server to get any changes that have happened since the last sync last night, for instance. So do leave that enabled, and then just click OK, and that will have configured this NetFolder server. So what we need to do now is just add in an additional server for our shared areas. So I'm just going to click on add. The name, this can be anything. Your users aren't going to see this, so let's just call this Windows Share. Server type is Microsoft Windows. Server path is going to be fs1.demo.live, and then that's going to be shared. Click on authentication. I could specify username and password, but in this case I'm just going to use a proxy identity, which is going to be that Windows proxy. I'm just going to test the connection. That succeeded, so do close. Just go on to the schedule, which we're going to enable. I'll do every day, and this one I'll kick off at 7 o'clock in the evening, just stagger it a bit compared to the other ones. And then on the sync options I want to enable just-in-time sync. Typically that's something that I would recommend having configured. Say OK, and there we go, we've got that set up. But we need to set up the net folders that are going to be going against that. So now just go into the net folders, click on add, and we'll create a net folder called sales. Net folder server is going to be that Windows Share. Relative path is going to be sales, I think. I can just do a test connection. That succeeded there. I then have various options for the index setting and the just-in-time. We'll use what's on the net folder server. If I go to rights, this is who can access this particular share. Typically I tend to put in all internal users, which is a default group that gets created, and say that they can access this net folder. The reason for that is we can, rather than specifying user by user or group by group who's got access and replicate what you've got on the file system, we can just say to Filr, everyone has the possibility to see this if the file system allows them. If I don't have rights in the file system to see this folder, I'm not going to see it at all. So we're just passing off the responsibility for allowing people to see it to the file system, where you've been spent maybe 20 years setting up file access rights for your users. So we can just pass that responsibility on to the file system. The only time you'd really want to have multiple settings in here is if you have different share settings for users. So some users may be allowed to share internally, some externally, in which case then you'd separate out the bits and pieces here. So in this case I'll just say that they can be shared internally by all users. I'll click OK. We have the sync schedule, and we can, in this case I'll just say use what we've got defined on the net folder server, and then click data sync, and here are we going to let the desktop access this data? So I think most probably yes, in this case sales information. Click OK, and then we get prompted, do I want to sync this net folder now? So if I click OK and say yes, then that will go. If I click on that circle there, or it may be a green tick, once it's completed, we'll see that sync happen in real time, so we can see the files coming up. It will update, I don't know, every 10 seconds or so. But something that's useful here is this bit. It just tells you how long that sync took to take place. So that gives you an indication of how long it will take when doing the sync overall. Just remember that first time you run a sync, obviously it's creating all the database entries and so on. After that, it's really the secondary syncs that are thereafter that are the ones that are going to be run regularly. So if that takes more than 12 hours, you most probably don't want to run that in the evening, because it will butt into the production of day whilst your users are online. So think about that there. I'll just click close on that, and let's just quickly add a couple more options here. So in this case, let's just add marketing and change that to Windows Share. Relative path is going to be marketing. By the way, the name I've got up here, the users are going to see, so make it something that they understand. Click on test, that's okay. Use settings, rights here, I'll say all internal users, and let's say that they're allowed to share it externally from here as well. On the sync options here, we'll use what's on the net folder, and we'll allow that, so say okay. And finally, I'm just going to add a finance folder. So again, let's just call this finance, change that to the right one, and that's going to be finance. Just check that works. Go to rights, all internal users, allow access to the net folder. Sync options here, we'll use what's on the net folder. And this one, being a high value folder, I don't really want people to take it offline. So in this case, I'll say they can't sync it to the desktop. And let's say OK to that. And there we are. To check that that works, let's just log out and log in as a user. So here I'll log in as Filr 11, and a password of so now I hopefully will see my home drive, and there we are. There's my home drive coming up, and if I go to net folders, I'll see the net folders here and be able to access information in those. So hopefully you can see there how easy it is to set up net folders within Filr. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this useful.